It's been a few years now since the Eighth Amendment was repealed from the Irish Constitution, which brought in one of the most radical and liberal abortion regimes in the entire world. And so, in hindsight, now that we've really seen the reality of it, the question must be asked: were the Irish people lied to about abortion? This is Ben Scallan, and you're watching Gript Media. In the run-up to the 2018 abortion referendum, there's one slogan that we heard non-stop on loop from politicians and the media, and that's that abortion was going to be, quote, safe, legal, and rare. This was trotted out constantly by politicians and campaigners at all levels of government. They repeated it on loop like some kind of broken push toy.
If the amendment is approved in a referendum, abortion in Ireland will become safe, legal, and rare in the situations provided for by the Oireachtas.
And I too, along with the Taoiseach, Minister Harris and all of my government colleagues, hope that our people, that together we will live in an Ireland someday soon where abortion is safe, legal and rare.
By the way, just FYI, that was Catherine Zappone speaking, who was a TD at the time, and when she made that speech, she was the Minister for Children and Youth Affairs. Imagine the Minister for Children campaigning for aborting babies. Some circus of a country that we live in, eh? But regardless, that's a side issue. The point is, Irish people were told repeatedly that abortion would be rare, implying that it would only be for the extreme and quote-unquote hard cases. In fact, before the referendum, when the yes vote slipped under 50%, abortion campaigners falsely told voters that if they don't vote yes, women would die. Project Fear writ large. And it was largely on that basis that the Irish people voted yes. They thought that they were getting something measured and restrictive. But what really happened? Well, let's take a look at the first year of Ireland's abortion regime, 2019, the only year so far for which we have any numbers, and see how that worked out in reality. A total of 6,666 abortions were carried out in Ireland last year, that is 2019, according to the official figures. Details have been released of the first year where terminations of pregnancy were allowed to be carried out in certain circumstances following the repeal of the Eighth Amendment. Okay, so not rare at all then. Constant, actually. And in fact, the true figure is even higher than that, because despite abortion being legalized here, hundreds of women still traveled from Ireland to the UK for abortions in the same year. So the total was over 7,000 abortions in 1 year. Does this sound rare to you? That's 19 abortions a day for a year. Right now, today, when you're watching this video, there will be 19 abortions in Ireland, almost one every hour. Not that there'll be any consequences for that, of course. Our ballots have already been cast, the damage has been done, and most of them are still elected and free to do as they please. But we should at least remember their hypocrisy and dishonest campaigning. On top of all of this, the vast majority of the abortions undertaken were elective. As reported in News Talk, 100 abortions were related to cases where there were conditions likely to lead to the death of a fetus. The remaining 24 were conducted when there was a risk to life or health of the woman, including 3 cases in an emergency. So that's 124 abortions for what they call the hard cases as far as we know, and that's ignoring the fact that lots of parents say that if they had the right help and support, they would actually carry a sick baby and take care of it. That still leaves almost 7,000 abortions. This is where there's nothing wrong with the woman, there's nothing wrong with the baby, both the mother and the child are perfectly healthy, there's no risk to anyone's life or health, and almost 7,000 babies are being terminated under these circumstances every single year. Is this what the average Irish person voted for? An utter free-for-all? Because that's exactly what we got. In fact, so extreme is Ireland's abortion regime that a recent study showed that there were cases right now in this country where babies are being born alive after botched abortions and left to die. This is happening right now. There was a study from September last year based on a series of interviews with 10 fetal medicine specialists carrying out abortions across Ireland. And before I read this excerpt, bear in mind that this study was published in the International Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology and was conducted by researchers from University University College Cork. So this is not coming from some pro-life blog. This is what the actual doctors and medical experts are saying. So if you have a problem with anything you're about to hear, don't come after me. Bring it up with the obstetricians and gynecologists. I'm just the messenger relaying what the experts are saying. As reported in the study, half of the specialists identified a role for feticide depending on the anomaly, whereas some expressed that feticide needed to be mandatory for late gestations because it was in the best interest of the baby not to be born alive. This generated concern for specialists as they are unclear as to who will look after those babies if a baby is born alive following termination of pregnancy by induction of labor and without feticide, resulting in them begging people to help them in providing palliative care. So where there is an attempt to abort the baby and the baby is instead born alive outside the womb at a late term, no doubt crying and breathing and moving around, the doctors are left begging people for help and they can't find it. Is that not the most gruesome thing you've ever heard? And this is happening in our country right now. Not to make this about me, we're talking about a major societal issue here, but I have a loved one in my own family who was born 11 weeks premature. I'm sure many people watching this video do as well. So is there not something sick about the fact that in one ward of an Irish hospital, a baby could be born alive prematurely and doctors could be working around the clock to save her life, and then in the next room over, a baby who is at the very same week of gestation and development is being intentionally killed? What kind of a backward society would do such a thing? On top of this, over half of doctors are scared of okaying an abortion in the case of so-called fatal fetal abnormality in case someone else does not agree that the child's condition is indeed fatal or they make a mistake. Fetal medicine specialists identified that if a termination of pregnancy for fatal fetal abnormality has been performed and the diagnosis is found to be incorrect, the specialists feel vulnerable to prosecution and the media scrutiny that an incorrect diagnosis would create. As a result, over half of the participants shared their fear of getting the diagnosis wrong. So in other words, doctors are terrified that they may diagnose a baby with a life-limiting condition, perform an abortion on that basis, and then find out that the baby is perfectly healthy and they've essentially killed a perfectly happy, healthy baby for no reason. And of course, that fear is not unfounded because it's already happened in this country. Couple at the center of Holles Street abortion case utterly devastated. The couple at the center of a case involving an abortion at the National Maternity Hospital in Holles Street are mentally and physically devastated, according to the solicitor representing them. An external review is due to be carried out into the circumstances around the abortion, which concerns a couple who earlier this year were told that their baby had a fatal fetal abnormality. It is understood that an abortion was then carried out at over 15 weeks. It is thought that the baby had trisomy 18, also known as Edwards syndrome, but a series of genetic tests later found out that this was not the case. So they were told by the hospital that their baby had a fatal genetic condition and aborted the baby on that basis, only to find out that the baby did not have the disease and would have lived after all. Personally, I don't think there's ever an excuse for abortion. Even a life that only lasts 5 minutes is precious and worth something. None of us are guaranteed a long life. But still, to needlessly lose a healthy baby because of a misdiagnosis is utterly tragic any way you slice it. And yet this story is already essentially forgotten about. This happened the year we legalized abortion, and the media conveniently sweeps it under the carpet. The study also describes the internal struggle experienced by abortion doctors as they wrestle with the reality of what they have to do for a living. Internal conflict was experienced by almost all fetal medicine specialists as a result of caring for women with a fatal fetal abnormality. They expressed having a line that they do not cross and that the condition being terminated is a significant abnormality. Over half of the specialists expressed internal conflict about the provision of feticide and the need to separate yourself from it completely. They described feticide as brutal, awful, and emotionally difficult, referring to it as stabbing the baby in the heart, and held themselves responsible for the death of the baby. I caused the death. One doctor said, and I quote, "It is always very sad and emotional. It is difficult, but something that I guess that I've been doing for a long time, and I'm aware that I've been doing it for a long time. It doesn't necessarily mean it gets any easier. It is always very sad. I remember getting sick out in the corridors afterwards because I thought feticide, was such an awful procedure and so dreadful. You have to see the positive in it, otherwise you would drive yourself mad." Now tell me, what other medical procedure elicits that kind of a reaction in a doctor? That doctor said that they had been doing it for a long time. What person makes it through medical school, has a long storied medical career, and then has to go out into the hall and get sick because they performed, say, a heart transplant, for example? Which doctor removes an appendix and then is haunted by it for weeks and talks about how sad and dreadful it was? Well, let me spoil the answer for you. None. No experienced doctor reacts that way with any other procedure. They know that this procedure is radically different to any other area of their profession, and it takes a toll on them psychologically. Even politicians saying that abortion should be rare exposes the fact that they know deep down it's no ordinary procedure. If the baby is just a clump of cells like we're told, then why should it be rare? Why not have 10 abortions a year? Sure, it's no big deal, right? Is it immoral to go for a tooth cleaning every week or to get your eyes checked every month? It's just a simple part of healthcare, am I right? Except nobody acts like that, not even pro-choicers. They know it's nonsense, and so do we, and so do the doctors, and so does everyone else. We're all playing this pantomime as a society where we pretend it's no big deal. Take Claire Daly on RTE1 saying that an early miscarriage is just like a heavy period and basically implying that it's not a big deal.
And many women out there, it's a normal part of pregnancy that people miscarry in early pregnancy. And what they discharge from that miscarriage is really like a heavy period. It doesn't
Claire,
look
so
anything
insulting.
like a human being. It can't react like a human being. Much of its instincts are reflexes.
Imagine saying that to a woman who's just miscarried. That's one of the most hurtful and offensive things you could ever say, and we all know it. We all know someone who's experienced the pain of miscarriage and losing a baby. No sane person would say, "Ah, sure, it's only a clump of cells, get over it." In fact, the clump of cells thing is not only medically nonsense. I mean, Oxford University have even confirmed that the human heartbeat starts 16 days after conception, which is before most people even know that they're pregnant. So basically you're stopping the heartbeat of a living human being. All biologists and medical experts agree that human life begins at conception. This is not disputed by anyone who has studied the subject closely. So medically, the clump of cells thing is an utterly false narrative used to dehumanize the unborn baby. But even aside from that, it's an insult to anyone who's ever miscarried in early pregnancy. You're basically saying to a grieving woman that she didn't really lose a baby. It's just an embryo, so who cares? That's the logical conclusion of what they're saying. And then on the other hand, if we do accept that she is a little baby and that losing her is a tragedy, then why are we ending the lives of thousands of babies at the same level of development every single year? Why are we knowingly ending the lives of babies and then acting like it's okay? And of course, abortion carries with it its own dangers to women's physical and mental health. I'll let my good friend and medical doctor Leo Varadkar explain what abortion can do to women back before he changed his stance on the issue to the trendy position when he was still partially telling the truth.
Countries with very liberal laws, like Britain, for example, not only do they end the life of the unborn, they also put women at risk because women can die as a result of terminations, can be injured as a result of them, or even lose their fertility. So
bear in mind, he introduced abortion knowing everything he just said. He was fully aware of the implications when he signed it into law, being a medical doctor himself, and yet he did it anyway. In 2018, an Irish woman bled to death in the back of a British taxi after an abortion where her womb was torn. And bear in mind, this wasn't in some dodgy back alley illegal practice. This was in a Mary Stopes clinic in West London. She was discharged despite vomiting, having a laceration on her uterus, and died that same day. But we never talk about that, do we? Even as a policy, morals aside, it's preposterous for our country. We don't have enough young workers to deal with the pension time bomb that's coming our way, to the point where we have lunatics proposing that we import 4 million migrants to sustain the state pension system. And at the same time, we're aborting thousands of would-be Irish workers in the womb. How does that make any sense? Mary Lou has advocated for encouraging people to have more kids as a way of dealing with the problem, something that I couldn't agree more with. But then she turns around and says stuff like this.
The position of the state is now untenable. It's now absolutely clear that the 8th Amendment has to be repealed.
So she's simultaneously trying to promote more Irish babies to save us from demographic destruction, and at the same time she wants to promote termination of pregnancies. And all of these parties want mass immigration. Their motto might as well be abort and import. I honestly don't care what the polls say. Irish people did not vote for this, and the fact that such an extreme regime has been foisted on our society in such a short period of time shows just how rotten our system really is. Please like and share this video, and if you enjoyed it, please consider signing up for a monthly donation via the link on screen to help us produce more content like this. Alternative media like Gript needs all the assistance it can get, and every donation goes a long way. As always, thanks for watching.